Hey everyone, Brian Beeler, and thanks for tuning into the Storage Review podcast. Today I've got actually a longtime friend of ours joining in from Nvidia, and our relationship with Luke started years ago on end user computing. And way back then, we were talking about how organizations can take these expensive GPUs and maximize their leverage in an organization. Now, some of that started out with really classic time-shifting techniques using the GPUs for intensive Creative Pro, SolidWorks type use cases during the day, and then letting it run analytics at night. Then we got into things like virtualizing the GPUs, multi-instance GPUs, all sorts of other ways to take advantage of GPUs in really powerful ways that could help creators do more and help organizations leverage these expensive assets more frequently around the clock if they were really sharp about it. Anyway, we worked with Luke on all this stuff for all these past years on end user computing and VDI and all these things. Now, Luke's involved with a new initiative, Nvidia Launchpad. And the Launchpad isn't entirely new, but this week it was updated, released out to GA with all sorts of new stuff going on. So I want to talk about that. I want to get you guys up to speed on what Nvidia's doing to enable proof of concept systems with A30 GPUs or T4 in some cases for AI ML workloads to let orgs really get into the thick of it really quickly, get a feel for how these GPUs can accelerate their workloads, and then get these things into production. So Luke Wignall, NVIDIA, thanks for coming in today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So you went from end user computing nerd to now a really important guy dealing with enterprise GPUs. How did that happen?
Like we talked about the other day, it's all servers. It's all servers, right? It's all about data centers. No, I mean, I think actually the irony of this is when we talked before about vGPU and taking VDI to that next level, we were talking about accelerating users, right? We were talking about enabling users to do more with bigger, heavier workloads than they'd ever done before, and give them freedom, right? Unchain them from their desk, from their big workstation or whatever, and arguably still VDI was in one corner of the data center, right? It wasn't a core data center function way back when. Sadly, the last year and a half has made remote work a thing, right? And so all of a sudden it's in the core. Well, this has really over the last couple of years really exposed a need to be thinking differently about the core data center. It's not just stayed, big monolithic, Exchange servers, SQL servers, whatever, the core elements of a data center. It's about all of these very nimble, very demanding workflows that need to be accelerated. So the old days, vGPU was a big piece of that conversation, and accelerating graphical workflows. The more that we've seen a shift to the value of data and the value of insights that can come from data, all this data existing in the core data center, where historically those workflows have all happened again in the corner of the data center, in some cluster over here, or a Linux pod, or whatever, and that doesn't fit in the mainstream data center, right? It's not manageable by the same tools. It's not flexible. It tends to be a big investment, so it ends up becoming a bit of an ivory tower, right? I want to be able to explore data. I want to do some workflows, and so I've got to have special equipment, and it'll be over here isolated with a different, shadow IT, I think is the sort of cliche term for it. And there tends to be a lot of friction between all these teams as they try to coexist in that data center. Same story I could have said about vGPU and did over those years. I'm now saying about data science as a large term that covers everything from AI, deep learning, ML, you name it. And the challenge still exists that those users that are demanding resources to be able to analyze that data they're tricky users to support. And so the same way I was having conversations before about how do I take care of an engineer or an artist or a designer with their extreme workflow with GPUs and so forth, now I have AI practitioners that are screaming for very flexible, very powerful resources to do development work, data analytics work, what have you. And as an IT person, I'm sitting there staring at this complex use case where how do I help them? How do I
Hmm.
support them? How do I roll this out? How do I manage it? Not just day zero, what do I need to build for them, but day two, how do I manage and maintain that for them? How do I ensure that it's secure? And 9 times out of 10, this stuff ends up getting pushed out to, some do-it-yourself, roll your own Linux solution that's not managed properly. And then they're back to that friction with IT again. Long story
Well,
short. Oh,
yeah,
go
I mean,
ahead.
you're setting up a lot of challenges, right?
Hmm.
And probably where you were going to go is that it's all the same, is just sort of shifted in terms of where these things are happening and where the importance lies. But help kind of reset the personas that we're dealing with here and how those users or use cases interact with both the hardware required to create these AI and ML kind of things, these algorithms, whatever it is that they're working on, or engines, and then where that relates to the inferencing, where the data resides, because there's just so much here. Because a lot of what you talk about, we see individual data scientists working on high-end workstations, and they'll often do a lot of work there. But then the problem is that workstation doesn't have the data necessarily because that's in the data center or somewhere else. So then they've got to pull down data sets or get their thing closer to the data. So there's some logistical challenges there. Then we've seen a number of instances where we're putting the GPUs in the data center, which makes sense, and then letting these guys remote in. But that's a different set of challenges from potentially desktop security for the more the traditional thin client or remote workforce world. And then we've got these enterprise applications that are already built and running that need these things. So just help us sort of reset on these, where these GPUs come into play specifically, and what types of users have these certain personas that you've been able to maybe not isolate, but put enough gravity around that you can define them and start to come up with solutions to support these people.
It's funny. The more mature a customer is in this landscape, the more personas there are. If you have somebody who's fairly new to any of this, it's going to be some data person, right? Doesn't have to be a data scientist. Could be a data analyst. Could be pick your title. We sort of bundle them under AI practitioner as a
Okay.
persona. And then you have the IT person, right? You have the core IT, sysadmin, classic sysadmin. Now, if you get to a more mature customer that's, maybe progressed somewhat down this path, then you start hearing things like DevOps, DevML Ops, ML DevOps. I mean, I swear there's a new acronym for this every time I turn around. And this just propagates, which I would argue exposes part of the problem, that it's not simple. It can be very complex. And so, a couple of the early data points we got talking to customers about this. Supporting AI practitioners in general is 3 to 5 times more support intensive than a standard user. I heard that from multiple customers. That's where the range comes from, 3 to 5. But none of them said they're equivalent. They are just that much harder to take care of.
Well, it's good. Is it their apps? Is it their hardware? Is it they
Oh, let
break
me
stuff all the time?
I think those were all yes. But no, another data point, and it's the other side. So you asked about the two key personas, and I would say it's IT and the data practitioner, whatever you want to call them. And if I talk to the IT person, they're like, oh, those AI people are 3 to 5 times more complicated to take care of. They're my nightmare because I don't understand their world. I don't know what they need, and they appear to want a lot of things, and they want a lot of flexibility, right? A lot of performance, right, and compute power and so forth. Then if I go over to the other side of the table and I talk to the AI person, the data scientist or what have you, their comment back is, for every, and this is an actual data point, for every AI project, 70 to 80% of the entire project time, from ideation or task given all the way through to an application or something deployed and it's actually doing something, right? 70, 80% of that project time is fighting with IT to get the right workbench to work on. Like that's
Okay.
so you take those two data points and I don't care what Nvidia does to speed up the software side of this, right? Nvidia AI enterprise software platform that we've also launched this year is a curated collection of libraries and so forth, containerized libraries that Just like Linux, why do you pay for Linux? It's free software. I've always said it's the most expensive free software on earth because you have to support it. Same idea. Instead of having to have this huge support requirement, we've put together a software platform that gives you a fully supported, curated set of libraries to kick off your AI. And why do we do that? Well, because if it's hard to deploy and then hard to use, so both those data points come into play, it doesn't matter what I do to speed this up with GPUs or anything else, you're wasting 80% of the project time saying, no, 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 I need more system memory on my VDI, or I need more, whatever, right? And it goes back and forth as a trouble ticket with your help desk until you finally get what you need to do your dev work on. Now you can start it.
Well, aren't we on this sort of time shift issue, or not even time shift, but the deployment time and adoption curve, right? So I'm here in Cincinnati. We've got Kroger, we got Macy's, big time retailers. They've been doing this for years, where they're analyzing traffic, where they're analyzing security and purchase intent, and Kroger's got these customized shelf talkers where they know who you are when you come in, and that Luke likes to buy Fritos, so when you're there, they're flashing a coupon. Whatever it is, they've been doing this for years. But all organizations have data, right? And even the smallest of organizations can be, or in theory, could be using that data to make some sort of intelligent decision about where we take the business. What do we offer for new product or service? What do we do? Like, they could be answering those questions, but many of them don't, because I think they think AI is scary or cumbersome, which can be true. But it gets to, I think, too, if they kick off a project and they're new at this and they don't have a dedicated practice within their organization that is supporting this type of activity, when you roll into IT and say, hey, I need 25 grand worth of gear to go dabble with this thing, and by the way, IT, you're not used to supporting this, you've not been trained on this, you don't have a core competency in managing GPUs and deploying them and this sort of thing. Of course there's going to be, I could totally see that, especially if you're new at this thing.
Well, but back to your comment about they've been doing this forever. I think, certainly machine learning, certainly data analytics have been around forever. Right? Absolutely true. What is new, though, is the ever increasing pressure to get real valuable insight real time, right?
Okay.
What's shifted is not whether or not Luke likes Cheetos or Fritos or any other brand, but I like this bag, and I have also bought, because it's in my hands or my cart, a whole bunch of bulky other items. So clearly, I'm about to throw a football party tomorrow.
Right, you want the party-sized Cheetos.
Yeah, exactly. So it's gonna direct me there. That's the sort of thing that I think hasn't ever been done before, because you couldn't, right? The data velocity is, I mean, people need to, and we sort of talked about this before the podcast kicked off, but people select the amount of data they're going to store, and I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but they check whatever boxes on whatever logging solution or whatever it is they're collecting data from, however they're doing it. And they're selecting source, they're selecting velocity, and all that's defined and retention defined by their ability to store it, right? And that's all defined by the value of the insight they get out of the data. And if my insight takes me 8 days, right, to get any sort of result, because that's what it takes to run this on CPUs and get some sort of analysis back, and that accuracy is at, I don't know, 60%, right? What if it's taken me 8 days to give you a guess? Right, slightly better than a guess. And you're supposed to make a judgment call about that and drive your business. You just can't. You need accuracy in the 90s. You need it to be nearly real time, to have any ability to be nimble and responsive. How do you get there? And then to the point you made before about the complexity of this, if it is complex or if it's not in your skill set, in your wheelhouse, now you're terrified. You're opening up Pandora's box, and if you do increase source and you increase velocity, now you have to, and retention, now you're spending millions on storage for something that now you're supposed to get real value out of. And so there's a lot of knobs that a lot of pressure points that end up on that sysadmin or that that core IT team that is being told to solve this. And the AI practitioner types, their problem is, how do I paw through all this data? Because what they really are data cowboys. They are, I think we have this perception that AI people are, their brains the size of planets and they're kept in special rooms or whatever, and nobody, they can, you know, who can speak to these people? No, every data scientist I've ever met is they're curious, they're creative, their job is to look at all these different data sources and find some question to ask of it that's going to create value for the company, right? And how to do that in a way that's meaningful and accurate and useful. And their challenge is, if it takes 8 days and that's a 60% accurate guess, they need to be right every time. So that takes out all their freedom, takes out all their creativity. I've always argued that what we're trying to do by accelerating these workflows, whether it be with our software or GPUs and hardware and so forth, is we're giving them the most important luxury of all, which is failure, right? To be able to ask questions and fail, like be wrong. Oh, what if I turn it this way? That's not going to work, right? I mean, that gives you an ability to gain insight you would have never had before. So when you say, grocery store chain X, Y, or Z has been doing this forever, sure, but has it really been that useful and effective? No, it's not accurate. It's not real time. It's there's way more room for this to be dug into and accuracy to be found. So how do we solve that, right? We've put together a set of solutions, and we haven't even gotten to Launchpad yet. Launchpad.
Yeah. Well, let's get to that. So you guys announced Launchpad earlier this year, and then this week, what is it? Now it's available, and you've got all this running on VMware and real. We looked at it on PowerEdge servers in Equinix. What do you tell? What have you put together?
An instant POC environment. I mean, it's that simple. It's a delivery mechanism for Nvidia AI Enterprise, right? That software package I was talking about. If right now, with supply chain issues and everything else that we're all fully aware of, it's a real challenge for a customer to gear up, invest in a pilot or a POC, and plus there's questions around, if it's going to take me 4 months to get a server or maybe even longer, what size should I get? How do I spec that server? How do I get any sense of that to make the right decision? We've already touched on all the other complexities. Now we're just to, okay, which server do I buy? What networking do I get? What do I do? Where do I start, right? So to answer that, NVIDIA put together Launchpad. It is essentially, it's just it's a POC environment. It's that simple. But it's beautiful in the sense that it's running VMware. It's using vCenter and all the traditional enterprise management tool set that you would expect. It's built around the two key personas, the IT person as well as the AI practitioner. We have built-in blueprints that allow you to actually do something, to accomplish something in it. What we didn't want to do, and this is a lesson learned from way early on at vGPU, is it's great to set somebody up with a POC. They get some servers, they rack and stack, and all of a sudden you got this glorious rack of humming, blinky light servers. Now what? Right? We haven't gotten to the value yet, right? You haven't done anything. And so what we didn't want to do with Launchpad is give you a PC environment with a server and say good luck. We wanted to give you a POC environment that either the IT person and or the AI person could run through labs, actual functional labs, and build up what they would need to deliver that workbench, that resource for that AI practitioner to do something on. The AI practitioner can then take that VDI, that instance, and build out like our first of the blueprints is a AI chatbot, support chatbot for IT. We thought, why not build something that you could potentially go home with? Like, take the thing home with you, use it,
So it's pretty cool. So we played around with it. We've been working on it and doing a deep dive that our team has been working on. But yeah, as IT admin guy, you log into vCenter and there you go. It's already there. It doesn't just look and feel like you're in a VMware environment. You're there. It's ours was a Dell R750, has an A30 GPU in it, and IT admin can go out and build that Ubuntu VM for the data scientist or whatever, and then send that person along on their way. And to your point, Well, first of all, it's easy because it's there, right, and it's already set up. But then you've got these recipes, more or less, where the users can go in and play and do something. And in your case, that first example, leave with a chatbot. But there's other stuff in there, or I guess for the data scientists too, they could bring their workload in, or a piece of it or
Absolutely.
something, and a little bit of data or whatever, and start to mess with this thing with their real stuff if they got that adventurous.
In fact, Launchpad's built around a 2 to 4 week window. I mean, this is not your classic, 24-hour test drive sort of environment. This is a
Right.
legit POC environment. The expectation, the reason we essentially spin up an entirely orchestrated ESXi environment. The assumption is the IT persona is already managing a VMware environment, right? 80% or something of all data centers run on ESXi. So, as Jensen famously said, it's the operating system of the data center, right? So that's why we keyed on it. And but I don't think anybody wants to sit through an ESXi install. That's been done before, right?
As exciting as that is,
Yeah,
yes.
exactly. Well, watching the Ubuntu install is, well, never mind.
Not much
The
better. Yeah, that's true.
That's right. So, that the idea was we're gonna put you where you probably are on a daily basis as an IT admin, right? Every day you stare at vCenter, you manage things. So that's where you start. That's the journey's beginning. But from there, and goes back to my earlier points about supporting these AI practitioners, we walk you through building out an appropriately sized virtual machine. We walk through optimizations. We walk through everything we can possibly do to make and simplify your ability to walk away from this experience and go, oh, all right, I get it now. As long as I have a server with a GPU and I buy some licenses for Nvidia AI Enterprise, I can start supporting my AI practitioners now, today. Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, yeah. I mean, I've talked to VMware about this. Lee Caswell and I have chatted a number of times about the value in getting all of this other workload stuff, all these AI things that have been in this sort of potential silos, right, in organizations, and get those into the VMware environment where they can be managed, protected, follow corporate data governance rules. It's really pretty important from the IT perspective to have those things wrangled and comfortable and managed. But you get a lot of other benefits too. You've got access to all the data. Everything's there. It's already in VMware, right?
Well, yeah, and this problem early on in this, we talked to a lot of the HPC customers that we have, and to get a sense. I mean, that's where a lot of this works. The more mature organizations are going to have that cluster in the back corner of the data center that's doing all this big heavy lifting and training against purchasing records or whatever else in order to figure out your grocery store example, for example. Sure, that exists, but they're also the thing they kept asking us on these calls was, our problem. We don't have that problem, right? Because we're already doing AI. But if you could please make that, crowd of, the unwashed masses of people wanting to get into AI and do stuff with data, those data explorers, right? If you could take those off of our cluster and give them some other resource to work on, that would be great. In other words, as AI gets out of this sort of, very, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of special, just sort of reserved. It's just everybody always treats it like it's not an everyday thing. And as it
Some
gets more
Skunkworks
everyday,
project, right?
yeah, and well, even the Skunkworks piece of this, in order for this thing to move out of the its sort of current special place and become a commonplace thing, right? And we were laughing about this on a previous call about the abused word democratized, but it has to be democratized. It has to be accessible to everybody who has an interesting question to ask of the data. If we keep it simple like that and don't make it so reserved and so ivory tower-ish, then all of a sudden everybody wants access to it. And so these HPC people are like, I've got to have some ability. So I would love for my IT team, right, the core IT people, to be able to just take all these little projects that I don't want to put on my cluster because it's doing big, valuable work, and it is, and give them some ability to just do their little exploration, dev work, whatever. Well, yeah, as you hear that, the first 6 customers we talked to, all 6 said that. I mean, that was the, hello, we have a product. We have a we have an issue here that we can solve. And so that solution was how to put together a full platform that enables any company with data to begin to do something with that data and really begin to build solutions that help them as a business, and starting from little dev projects all the way up. And so Launchpad is an ability to accelerate that. And I almost said the acronym. Nvidia AI Enterprise is a software package that makes it easy to deploy and easy to support. Um, you know, at the end of the day, the goal here is to enable any classic core IT person to comfortably and easily have a single help desk ticket conversation instead of multiple back and forth to right size it, and say, here are the 5 questions I'm going to have for you, or AI practitioner, to help me size this out, and I'll have it to you in 15 minutes. And we can show them that.
Yeah, so a couple things. I mean, it's real infrastructure, so it's in a real data center, real servers. I mean, you get access to a pretty well appointed setup there. I mean, I talked about the server, but the A30, just for some perspective, what's an A30 capable of, or how do you characterize that in terms of what you're putting in these systems and making available to prospects and customers?
Let me ask you one quick question first, though. When you saw those specs, was your initial reaction just well appointed but fairly typical ESXi host server, or were you like, oh man, this is a Lamborghini?
We're a little skewed from norm by having so much stuff in our lab here in Cincinnati that we see Lamborghinis a lot, and so sometimes you get a little
Yeah.
a little numb. But I do think when we were going through that demo, I did say one of the first things was, oh wow, it's a modern server, so an R750, so Gen 4 and the latest Intel whatever. So that was good. I think if I recall, it had a pretty nice RAM footprint. And then an A30, which is a real GPU. It's not like some 4-year-old thing that you dropped in there just to, make people feel like they're getting access to toys. These are real toys.
Oh, right. But keep in mind, we want to make sure that the customer has a real opportunity to try out, right? And again, this isn't just a test drive. Our expectation is they're going to either build one of our blueprints and go through that experience, and or potentially start working on their own project, which they can export out of this and take their work home with them.
Yeah.
An A30 is essentially half of an A100, if I had to,
Okay.
overly simplify it. And the idea is the A30 is really, really well positioned as a starting point, right? If you're doing heavy training and you're looking for that max performance, A100, absolutely. But if you're looking at inferencing as well, which the T4 is certainly a great inferencing board, and also available in this. But the A30 is a perfect sort of mid spot, because a lot of customers are looking for that flexibility and that one SKU to buy, right? The one platform to support. They're looking for, again, easy to deploy, easy to use. And the idea around the A30, and if I'm buying an R750 and I'm equipping it with an A30, and I'm going to load it with, whatever, a half to a terabyte of RAM, it's going to look like and feel like any other host server, maybe not with an A30 in it, that I might have. And so it fits well into that data center. And this is actually an important point, because what we're after with this is not to give you a server that you have to build a custom data center around. We're giving you a server, an accelerated server, NV certified, right? So NVIDIA certified servers we've worked with all the OEMs. We've got servers that are pre-configured, built around things like A30s, right? As well as DPUs. Let's not forget the networking side of this. And you got to feed the beast, right? And the idea is, instead of having to figure out how to roll your own, how to build something on your own, how to custom, this should be a simple checkbox. I need 2 racks of these because I'm going to start supporting these accelerated workflows, and they will fit in my energy footprint. They'll fit in my cooling. They'll fit in my rack. I shouldn't have to do anything special for this. So it should be easy. That's step one. And starting with the A30 means it's a tremendous GPU. I don't need 4 of them in a server and some cooling or power complexity. Instead, I can drop this into any 2U server slot and off I go. Right? It should be that easy.
Well, you talked about taking your workloads with you when you're done with this couple week Launchpad test
Mhm.
drive. So, do you also see this as a potential sizing tool then, so that when I come out of this, I've got some idea about what I need to actually go do this back at my own shop, or what I need to buy if I'm going to go to the cloud, or whatever the sizing circumstances may be?
Absolutely. I mean, the
Okay.
goal of this should be that at the end of this at the end of this journey, the two personas, right? IT should walk away going, I now understand that using the same tool sets that I use every day to manage all my servers, right, all my nodes, right, my entire infrastructure. I can use that same management tool to now very quickly spin up and deliver resources to what were, right, were my some of my most complex to support users, right? And now they're not anymore. We just, check, box done, right? On the IT, or excuse me, on the AI side, um, the goal should be they have no desire to understand all the underlying infrastructure. They just want something to get to work on. Their minds are focused around the data, right? And the problems that they're trying to solve. They don't want to understand virtual machines, and they don't want to understand networks. They don't
Yeah.
understand the SAN or the storage, the data lies. I mean, all they care about is, can I get to the data? Is it fast? And can I solve my problems quickly? Can I very quickly get in and start developing a solution or a question, right? And get answers to that question, and then turn that into something bigger. And they leave with that same answer, easy to use, right? They walk away going, wow, I was able to very quickly set my requirements. The IT person handed me a functional workbench for me to get to work on, and I was immediately up and running. And in fact, I was able to do a blueprint, solve some of this, discovered some new tools I could use, and I walk away. And and we hope that they're comfortable enough to bring in. I mean, certainly not sensitive, proprietary data.
Sure.
This is a public. Uh, POC environment. I mean, each individual unit is unique to that user, and we provide best effort security. But the idea is, if you wanted to begin exploring some anonymized data or less sensitive data, and build out something that you would then export out and take with you, absolutely. And we're there to help them.
Let's talk about the help then a little bit. How, obviously, you've got a form, you can go on, fill it out, and then someone will contact you. But what do you think will be the most common vector to get people into this? Will it be a sales support function where Dell or Nvidia or HP or whoever it is says, "Hey, customer, if you're not ready to buy this thing, go check it out here as a driver"? Do you think it'll be data scientists that see the program and be, "Ooh, A30, let me go play"? That sounds like fun. What do you expect, or what are you seeing? I know it's early.
Well, I mean, keep in mind that while it's launched and now publicly available globally, we've got three global regions, 9 different locations. I mean, this is a real service offering, and they're up and running, ready to go. What we have seen as we've led up to this, and we've had some early customers in, um, it it seems to start mostly with IT, and I think it
Okay.
starts there because of what we've already talked about. They're the ones, at the end of the day, the AI practitioner. They have all sorts of options in front of them. Could be a laptop that they own. That could be cloud. It could be whatever. There could be 50 help desk tickets later, and they get something from IT. But they'll get what they need, right? Um, the challenge is, how do you get IT that they don't want their data in the cloud necessarily, and especially if it's proprietary and business critical. They're looking for an answer to keep it local, but manage it locally, right? So it starts there, and that seems to be where many of these conversations come from. It's that it's that core IT that's looking to solve a problem that they have to take care of these AI practitioners, these data scientists, these data analysts, and they're just looking for help. They're looking, how do I right size this? How do I test this? And almost in every case, the problem is, I can kick this off, but it's going to take me time to get the equipment. It's going to take me laps in order to figure out how to even get this up and running and managed, and
Hmm.
then I have to figure out how to speak to my AI practitioners and understand their needs better. This is a long journey. And so the least that NVIDIA can do is simplify that and make it a really easy, quick process, painless process for them to get in. And so sources, not to say that AI folk haven't also come into this, but generally speaking, they've come to us because they're trying to figure out how to speak to their IT teams and ask
Okay.
for the right resources. So inevitably, it drifts back to IT.
So you get them in there, they're playing around with it. It's largely self-directed. It can be entirely self-directed. There's no,
Can be.
yeah, it doesn't require you to be on a Zoom session for hours with some Nvidia nerd going through all this stuff. But what is available if they want that support or interaction or have questions? Like what we didn't pursue that, so I genuinely don't know what's happening there from a support perspective.
Yeah, so there's multiple layers to that. As in all cases, sales is involved, and with sales, you get your sales engineer or your solution architect, and keep in mind, partners can bring customers through this. Other people can bring customers through this as well. So there's an expectation that there's I call it a tier one, right? That's already tied
Okay.
to that customer. But if a customer found this on its own, yeah, there's absolutely a feedback loop and a help. And then an entire team behind that essentially is built around tiers 2 and 3, but persona focused. So if the initial question comes out of the IT side of the house, right, then we have data center expertise on our side there to help, right, at both tiers 2 and 3 to really get into the weeds. And in fact, if a customer came to us with a very specific set of circumstances and needed some very specific answers, we can escalate this and even carve off and help them on a more intimate level within my own lab and other places as well. So the idea is there's sort of gradients here depending on the customer need. But the expectation is they should be able to go through this on their own. This should be something that a customer ought to be able to get, at least the fundamental core value pieces out of this without necessarily needing all that much hand-holding at all. You guys made
Well,
it
how
through it, so.
we might have broken it once, but that was self-inflicted
Well,
wounds. So it wasn't
classic
the
moment.
Launchpad problem.
Right, exactly.
Well, so talk about that though a little bit, because the way you talk about what NVIDIA is doing from a support and relationship building and enablement standpoint, I don't know if it sounds like more than normal, if it is more than normal, if it's what you've always done, it just is a little more public since you've got this Launchpad program that's out there. Do you have any sense of that in terms of, is this more than what you've done in the past to help customers sort stuff out?
It's funny. I'm sitting here trying to decide whether I want to frame the answer. Um, so I would argue, I've been here a long time, and I started off as a solution architect myself, and I would say that one of the early frustrations I always had is that people don't call NVIDIA enough, right? They lean heavily on all the other ecosystem partners and players, right? But they don't call us. Like
You're feeling left out.
I'm
I
feeling left
don't
out.
have a lot of sympathy though. I don't
There's a
think.
huge amount of expertise in NVIDIA, and we don't necessarily get called in as often as we should.
Well,
Um,
well, wait, is
well,
that
but
because? But is that because Nvidia has been viewed historically as a component provider, not to take away from what the GPU can do, and now the GPU is doing more than ever, and in many ways superseding the importance of CPU depending on the workload. That maybe that's changing, but I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh no, that was my framing question, because the
Yeah.
other
Okay.
part, the other way I would frame this is people need to stop thinking about NVIDIA as a GPU company. We're a platform company. We've been a platform company for a long time, and in fact, back to the very beginning of this chat we're having, and you asked, going from end user computing and how did I end up here? This is that was our first big platform in a lot of ways. I mean, there were others, but when you look at what vGPU represented, it was software, right? It was absolutely software. And when I started at NVIDIA, there were 7,500 employees back then. It's amazing how much smaller the company was, but how big it felt. And it's even then, the majority of the employees were software engineers. And I think people have just it's sort of muscle memory to think of us as this GPU company, and we're not. And you'll notice I've dodged your A30 questions throughout this entire chat because the GPU is an amazing thing. It's an incredibly powerful accelerator, but you know what? It's not half as powerful until you layer on, the software solutions and the platforms that we're building on top of that. And if you look at these stacks now,
Yeah.
all the things we're bringing to the table, I mean, there's an incredible amount of performance and
Well,
function in the software piece.
absolutely. I mean, the AI enterprise thing is absolutely huge, and this makes it so easy to go and play. But I do wonder because you mentioned DPUs once. Obviously, there's the Mellanox group has been folded in, so we've got all this new Quantum 2 400 gig switching coming. We've got next gen ConnectX cards. We've got fours, fives, and sixes all over the lab. We've used those things like crazy. Madi smiles a little bit every time we use a ConnectX 6 or even talk about it. He's probably smiling from his house right now listening. But so much great stuff coming there. The DPUs with integrated GPU. We actually did a podcast with some of those folks a number of weeks ago. I'll link to that one in the notes because it's a really good primer on what is coming with DPU. So, what's the intent long term for Launchpad? Do you want to take this thing, like right now, this gets you into AI enterprise and gets you the feel of a GPU, but why not throw DPUs in there? Why not throw more infrastructure? Why not throw, vSAN or something else in there to give all sorts of other stuff? Or do you worry about it getting too big and too cumbersome?
No, in fact, it's funny. Thank you for the nice setup there. The Fleet Command. You didn't even talk about Fleet Command. There's a Launchpad also supports our Edge story as well.
Okay.
Fleet Command is an entire management layer designed to enable you to deploy easily at the edge. You're back to your grocery store example. I want to ship out a couple of servers to a micro data center in a closet at the local grocery store that's going to handle edge inferencing and maybe even some localized training, right? I want to be able to deploy that. Do I need to send a incredibly valuable key senior person to go set that up, or can anybody with an ability to plug the right cable into the right socket and power the thing up, and then I can use a management tool like Fleet Command to just discover it and then deploy an OS and deploy containers, and I'm up and running. Mm-hmm. You can do that in Launchpad. We have an entire Fleet Command persona chain in there as well, a journey for customers. And so yes, the expectation is that Launchpad, that idea of an instant POC to allow a customer to get up and running that fast, I think needs to be across all of our platforms. So DPUs, absolutely. The hardest challenge I think we have in front of us, and if you watch Jensen's keynote from GTC this past week, 90 minutes. If you do nothing else this weekend, please
That's
watch.
Short
this
for him, by the way.
It is. It is very short. It's the amount of information that he packs in that is insane. But what I would challenge you as you're watching this is keep tabs of how much software he talks about and how much hardware he talks about, right? The balance and how out of balance that is compared to past keynotes, and how important then the software is to Nvidia, right? And the enterprise solutions. The second thing I would tell you that feeds off that is, as you watch the keynote, watch how many pieces he pulls from previous parts of the keynote as he begins to build these solutions in. Mm-hmm. So it's this pervasiveness horizontally, right? And so to your question, a customer should be able to come into Launchpad and traverse horizontally across our solutions. That's the grand vision, right? A customer should be able to come in and say, I really want to solve my AI problems. It's the big point of pain that I've got in front of me right now. I need to be able to get value out of this data. I need to be able to have real-time answers back from this data. And then a second later, they should be able to say, oh, and I really have to figure out a way to offload, and speed up my ability to do SDN, right? I don't want that on my CPUs anymore. I want to be able to do that at real-time speed. And cybersecurity. I've got to have greater levels of cybersecurity per node. And these are multi-tenant devices, generally speaking, now, right? So shouldn't I have top level, next-gen intelligence analyzing every packet and everything that's happening for every one of those tenants on that node alone, as well as every other node? I mean, these are huge challenges. And so, yeah, we want to be able to show that off. We want to give them an opportunity to see that. And as they wake up to, I would say that customers are always held hostage by the IT challenges and limitations they have in front of them, right? We talked a little bit about data, and the value of the data is if I'm not getting great accuracy, if I'm not getting great feedback out of that data or insight out of that data, I'm not going to invest a lot of money in storing that data. So my investment in that area is going to be smaller. But if on the other hand, that data suddenly has a tremendous amount of value, all of a sudden, I'm going to increase my investment in that space. Well, that also then means that data has that much more value to, uh, you know, potentially people interested in hacking into that data, right? Getting access to that data, stealing that data. I
Yeah,
need to
sure.
protect it better. And so all these things start to grow on themselves as they get more comfortable in this space, right? And so we want them to be in a position to be able to, in this POC, be able to traverse and try different elements of this and piece together the right solution out of all the various elements, way beyond just a GPU that Nvidia brings to the table.
Yeah, I mean, it's makes perfect sense. And yeah, you're absolutely right. The addition too of what the Mellanox guys are doing, I think many people didn't really see it immediately because they were looking at ports and that's switches and that's not entirely exciting. But the enablement that offers and the new smart NICs are just so cool and so much in terms of capabilities in changing the whole underlying technology. So off OCP this week, there's a ton of talk about Ethernet connected SSDs again, and JBOF is coming back into vogue as something that was popular for just a minute in the software defined revolution and sort of faded away. Now that's very much back. Why not get the GPU almost dedicated access to the storage with nothing in between? I mean, that's pretty neat potentially. All sorts of good
All
stuff to be done.
Yeah, all I mean, and really, from an NVIDIA focused perspective, we're looking at this as um, where are the bottlenecks, right? Like what's slowing this down? What's keeping you? I mean, at the end of the day, what we care most about is the customer's ability to get their life's work done or their important challenge met or whatever it is that they're trying to do. That's the goal, right? It's not just about, how fast can we make this thing or how fast can that network go or how, whatever, right? But it's about how do we actually enable, uh, these huge paradigm shifts that keep happening, and we're accelerating all of those, and it's happening because we look at the entire ecosystem, we look for the bottlenecks, and we're doing our absolute best to find and smash every one of those bottlenecks to a point where, whether it is GPU direct storage, right? Why push this thing all over the bus? Why not go straight, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
if we're gonna really start pulling, making this data super valuable, then, yeah, 100 gig, yeah, 400 gig, yeah, like this is going to become necessary. Well, then it gets to things like, all right, well, now I got these giant core firewalls that I have to deal with, and they don't have enough throughput to handle what we're talking about. Well, yeah, maybe we need to distribute that work, right? Maybe we need to plant security in the back end of every single server out there, right?
Hmm.
Every workstation, even, right? Everything is going to need security. Everything needs security today. This isn't a gonna.
Well, it's funny though because the stuff that was always talked about at places like OCP, and we've got Supercompute next week, another great example of two places where all these big ideas were often discussed, but they never really applied to the masses, right? They applied to the top 30 hyperscalers. They applied to maybe the top, 80 or 90 supercomputers, but not even all of them. Now the stuff that we're talking about at the edge, this emerging tech, really feels like it's not so far from being enterprise applicable in a faster way than ever before. And maybe some of that is just the enablement that guys like Nvidia are doing to help take advantage of this stuff in a enterprise way much faster than before. I'm not sure. Do you feel that as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know if maybe I probably said this poorly earlier, but it's I think you're stuck, you're held hostage, right? You're stuck asking questions based on what you know and what you're able to do today, right?
Mm.
And in order to reframe people's perspectives so they can ask questions, they need to understand what's next, right? Or what's, you know, you know, it, if you look at some of the challenges over the past, you know, year and a half in this pandemic and everything else, some of the things that have been solved very, very quickly, it's not magic. It's just because things got accelerated. They've been getting accelerated year over year over year, for the last however many decades, right? And this is really getting to a point where we're able to help organizations glean greater insight at at rates never before seen, at accuracy levels that are mind-boggling. And you put that sort of opportunity on the table. Like I said, the luxury of failure, right? The luxury to try and miss, right? Is an incredibly powerful thing. And so I think you enable that across the board, and you do begin to see these like just mind-boggling solutions come out of all this, right? Things that, you know, 2 years ago we would have all looked at each other and said science fiction. Nope. Nope.
All right. So it's a very cool solution. We're working on it. We'll have some more content about this thing. I am a little afraid, though, that you're going to get so many people interested in this that you're going to get a long queue to be able to have access to these things. What does that look like if someone hits your form today? You know, how long until they can get in there and start playing?
Oh no, it's right now. We've got sufficient bandwidth. We can absolutely take people on, and we would love to have the problem of a long queue. That's come on, that's the goal, right? Okay. And the cool part is working with Equinix, and this whole thing's built on Equinix Metal. Is we can scale, right? We can absolutely add bandwidth to this thing as we need to, and be able to handle the rush of this excited crowd. But I would absolutely challenge anybody that's excited about this, and I think you're going to share the link at the end of this. Yep. And but basically, if you're Googling the AI software suite for IT, is the byline on the webpage itself at Nvidia.com, and but it's Nvidia AI Enterprise. There's a try now, get started today, I think is the button, and click that, fill out a form. There's some qualifying questions to make sure this is something that you're going to be able to take use of immediately. And part of that's getting the right personas on the table, right? Getting both that IT and that AI, both those parties together. And then, we get you started. We spin up you can basically get one of these environments up and running in about an hour and a half from zero. And so from our support perspective, it's really easy to get a customer onboarded, get them up and running. We got great documentation. Although you guys did manage to find something we could edit, and thank you. Really have done a ton of work to make this painless, right? Easy.
All right, so it's easy, it's free.
It's free.
Couple weeks.
Officially supposed to say it's no charge.
It's free. You get a couple weeks, two to 4 weeks. Yep. I'm sure if you're still working, you can beg for a little more time. If you've got a shovel-ready project, why not, right? Go mess around with this and get access to, by the way, all of the latest everything from hardware, software, all of it, right? There's little reason not to take your project there to go see what it can do.
Absolutely. And as you've said previously, if you want to start with the blueprints, great. That's why we put those together, those, those labs that you can build something out. And you can, but if you want to, take it to the next step beyond that, and we're here to help you. If you want to do that, we want you to do that. So that'd be great. In fact, as a parting shot, the first blueprint that we put into the original product description for this, as we were figuring out where to start, was this support AI support bot. And we were discussing what to put in there. So this is a shout out to all the IT admins out there that want to try this. What we actually put in there, it's based on BERT. It's natural language processing. It's essentially, if you're tired of having to answer the question of, how many characters do I have to use in my password sorts of help desk, those help desk questions that make you drink a lot of coffee. The support bot can answer those for you, and it's functional. It works. Like, you can build it, deploy it, export it, take it home.
Yeah, well, I know the first thing, that's the support bot. If I know IT guys, the first thing that's going to say is, "Did you turn it on and off and back on yet?
Yeah, have you rebooted?"
Was that already built into the default AI?
Hey, you got it. You got to do the blueprint, and you'll find out.
All right. So guys, if you want to learn more, check out the blueprints. Check out this Launchpad thing. It's very, very cool. We'll put a link in the show notes and in the description if you're checking this out on YouTube. Luke, thanks for joining in. It was a pleasure to speak with you as always.
Yeah, it's been fun. Thank you very much.